We can't do nothing. We have to do something.
Shame on you!
But I'm also asked to look and determine if the executive order is rationally based. And rationally based to me implies that to some extent I have to find it grounded in fact as opposed to fiction.
It is our duty to fight! It is our duty to win!
Police had to lock the doors.
This is a wide sidewalk. So many people showed up. They packed it in both directions. They spilled over across the street and even onto the overflow area above.
If you couldn't see behind the signs, you wouldn't know their age, sex, or skin color. You just know they were united.
Love Trump's hate!
You had to wonder how much Amari Phillips really knows about it at age 10.
Mommy, that just said two bad words. I know, don't say.
President Trump is keeping people from 7 Muslim-majority countries away from the U.S. He says he's trying to keep the country safe.
Why is fear dictating our actions, shaping our behavior?
Protesters migrated inside to keep the commander-in-chief from closing America's doors.
The way you do it is boots on the ground, moving with your feet, stopping injustice where you see it.
In turn, the airport locked its doors, but the curbside protest pushed on.
Come on!
I noticed Phillips changed the chant, and one small word made a big difference.
We stand with immigrants! We stand as immigrants!
He knows more than you might think. He and his brother were born into poverty in Ethiopia. This is their mom, who tutors kids with any religion from any country. This is their flag. This is their home.
Whose country is this?
Mine.
Yeah?
And everyone else's. Everyone knows that this is my home and this is your home. So all he's doing is changing that.
And everyone is just headed home for the night. I can tell you, though, even on the busiest travel days of the year, I haven't seen a crowd like this out here.
Large protests continue across the country over President Trump's executive order banning entry to the U.S. for people from 7 Muslim-majority countries. Crowds have gathered at airports where men and women are being held and in city parks, including Battery Park in New York City. That's where CBS News producer Gilad Thaler is now. Gilad, what can you tell us?
Hi, Elaine. I am currently in Foley Square with a large group of protesters. This group began gathering and demonstrating in Battery Park around 2 p.m. Eastern Time. They have then had multiple speeches, including the mayor de Blasio. They quickly took to the streets chanting and singing in demonstration of the new executive order. And as you can see behind me, they still have a lot of momentum here. Together with signs. It's a very diverse crowd of multiple ages and religions. We've seen multiple signs talking about all faiths coming out together against this new ban that is currently only temporary for now.
U.S. President Donald Trump's executive order to speed up 2 controversial oil pipelines has sparked demonstrations in downtown Los Angeles.
We have to be the movement that sees Donald Trump to an early exit from the White House, because for him to be able to just willy-nilly sign executive orders that literally put our society into chaos tells me that he's unfit to lead.
The demonstrators marched on the city's federal building in protest against Trump's decision to revive the Keystone XL and Dakota Access oil pipelines. There was a heavy police presence at the peaceful rally. Former President Barack Obama had blocked the projects on environmental grounds. Local tribes in North Dakota say the pipeline there threatens their sacred ground and water resources under Lake Oahe. Around 700 activists as well as tribesmen have been arrested since August 2016 when they began the protest against the project.
Hundreds of Yemeni bodega owners closed their New York shops in protest of President Trump's travel ban. Small groceries, delis, and coffee shops owned by Yemeni Americans are prominent in the streets of New York City. but their owners locked the doors and turned out the lights on February 2nd. Bodega strike organizers estimate 1,000 shops across all 5 boroughs participated. Instead of tending to their shops, they rallied in the streets. Thousands protested outside Brooklyn Borough Hall on Thursday. Pictures show both American and Yemeni flags raised high above the crowd. They were taking a stand against Trump's January 27th executive order, which imposed a temporary travel ban on 7 Muslim-majority countries, including Yemen. The order also calls for an indefinite ban on Syrian refugees and a temporary suspension of all other refugee admissions. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio tweeted that he stands with the protesters for, quote, bravely shutting their doors to oppose the president's shameful executive order.
President Trump is making it much riskier to be an undocumented immigrant in Miami. Miami-Dade County Mayor Carlos Jimenez said the county will comply with Trump's executive order forcing all so-called sanctuary cities to turn over undocumented immigrants who are arrested. Sanctuary cities or counties are areas where local officials decline federal requests to hold people in jail due to their immigration status. Miami-Dade is technically considered a sanctuary county, but not because of any moral opposition. It refuses to indefinitely hold undocumented immigrants simply because the federal government doesn't foot enough of the bill for keeping them locked up. Trump signed an executive order that says sanctuary cities will lose their federal funding if they continue to deny federal requests to hold arrested immigrants. But it would only have cost the county $52,000 to detain every inmate the federal government wanted to deport in 2016. Jimenez said that wasn't worth the risk, considering Miami-Dade will get $355 million in federal funds this year. But Miami-Dade might be one of only a few large sanctuary counties complying with the order. The mayors of Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York City said they're not going to cooperate.
Hey, no fear! Immigrants are welcome here! Welcome to the Winter White House, President Trump.
Trump's gotta go! Trump's gotta go!
On his first visit to his Florida vacation property, or Winter White House, as he likes to call it, President Trump was greeted by hundreds of protesters. His executive orders on immigration woke up a region not known for big protests or civic engagement. Jacqueline Higginson is a war veteran.
What he's doing to our country, we're supposed to have religious freedom, and Muslims are welcome here, Hindus are welcome here, Christians are welcome here, agnostic, atheists, we're all welcome here. That's what I fought for, religious freedom. So yes, I absolutely will be protesting his presidency.
Protesters assembled in front of Trump Plaza and marched 4 kilometers to get as close as they could to his property there. Some were driven by Trump's travel ban against 7 Muslim-majority countries. Others were simply outraged.
Everything what Trump is doing is against our democracy, and my husband and I are seriously getting our passports ready, and Costa Rica's looking good. Freedom of speech. Some states are already voting to deny protests. That's First Amendment speech. What is going to happen to this country? I'm afraid our country is going down the tubes.
It's a stunt. It's a publicity stunt to shock and awe us all that he get everything done in the first week of his presidency, now going into 2 weeks, and nothing's getting done. It's all smoke and mirrors.
In Miami, hundreds of marchers also came out and demanded protections for the immigrant community.
People gathered from different parts of Florida to voice their opposition against Trump's executive orders and promised to continue protesting his presidency for as long as it takes.
No ban, no wall, America for all. No ban, no wall, America for all.
The response has been overwhelming.
For the last 8 days, I've been almost shell-shocked as each day got worse with decisions and executive orders that destroy the United States that I have grown up in and that I love, and destroying just the very human values that the United States stood for, of love and compassion, of welcoming refugees, of being a place of refuge.
No ban, no wall, America for all.
No ban.
No wall.
No ban.
No wall.
Would like to explain why it's so important for them to stand here in solidarity.
The Arab League too has responded to Donald Trump's temporary ban. Secretary General of the League, Ahmed Abu El Gate, says he's deeply concerned about the restrictions. CGTN's Adel Mahroui has more.
After several days of silence, the League of Arab States has spoken out, severely criticizing U.S. President Donald Trump's immigration ban. 6 of the 7 affected countries by the executive order are Arab League states. Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abul Gheit has released a statement saying he's deeply concerned. He maintains Trump's decision could be a violation of international law, particularly the 1951 UNHCR Convention, considered the foundation of refugees' rights. Abul Gheit has warned that families could be torn apart under the ban and that the harmony between Arab and American societies would likely be disrupted. The Pan-Arab Organization is also concerned that the embargo discriminates between Muslims and Christians. The Secretary General insists there is no security justification for the ban and argues that a country with the capabilities and resources of the United States should be accepting more rather than fewer refugees. And even if the ban is temporary, Abul Gheit has warned that the impact will be widespread.
We are sending to the Trump presidency.
Well, Donald Trump's only been in office for 2 weeks, and we don't agree with these fast decisions on these executive orders. I think that over 300,000 people have been inconvenienced, either kept out of America or separated from their families. There's doctors and students who have not been allowed to come back from vacation. We don't think this was well thought out, and I think that it's not really legal.
We become very concerned, and we are angry actually with Donald Trump, why he mistreat the immigrant and refugee community who actually built the U.S. today. U.S. cannot be a great U.S. without the immigrants and refugee population. Many countries now are also, many states also expressing that they might do the same, by banning the people who wear a hijab, They are checking everyone on the street, whether they are terrorists or not. So the effect is actually creating a fear everywhere.
Thousands of kilometers from Washington, and the intensity of feeling that surrounds US President Donald Trump's 7-nation travel ban shows no sign of letting up. The streets of London again choked by those protesting Trump's executive order.
We need to stand up to people like Trump and say, we really are completely disgusted by what you're doing.
The things that he's threatening, the policies he's threatening, are going to threaten us all worldwide.
And when one group are oppressed, we are all oppressed and nobody is safe.
We can show Trump that we can stand up for this and we can fight back!
The protest follows a European Union summit in Malta, where UK Prime Minister Theresa May offered to act as a bridge to the Trump administration. Her efforts firmly rejected by the other 27 EU presidents and prime ministers. She returned to London only to find anti-Trump protests on the streets of her capital.
There is another element of anger to this protest, separate and distinct from the demonstration against President Trump's travel ban. It is the decision by the UK Prime Minister to invite the US President to London for dinner with the Queen and a state visit.
Protesters called on Prime Minister May to withdraw her controversial invitation to President Trump, something the UK leader has so far refused to do.
Protesters staged a protest outside of the U.S. Embassy in Manila. They also called for the abolition of the 2014 Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement between the U.S. and the Philippines. Well, the U.S. Embassy in Jakarta also has seen over 100 activists holding anti-U.S. placards. Indonesia has the world's largest Muslim population, though it is not among the countries facing restrictions. In Sydney, about 1,000 people gathered to protest against the Muslim ban. U.S. ties with Australia have become strained after Trump said a deal between the two nations on refugee resettlement was dumb. Under the deal, the U.S. would take more than 1,000 asylum seekers held on Nauru and Manus. In return, Australia would take refugees from El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras.
holding placards and chanting "No state visit." Tens of thousands of people protesting in British cities against US President Trump's travel ban on Monday night. The London protest outside the Downing Street residence of British Prime Minister Theresa May, calling on her to cancel Trump's planned state visit later this year.
And there comes a moment when we have to ask our government, where do you stand? And that's why I'm here today. Not just because I believe what Trump is doing is appalling, not just because I believe it's counterproductive, not just because I know that it will not achieve even what he says he is trying to achieve, but because I want my government to stand up and say, he is wrong.
However, May won't be backing down.
The United States is a close ally of the United Kingdom. We work together across many areas of mutual interest, and we have that special relationship between us. I have issued that invitation, informally issued that invitation for a state visit for President Trump here to the United Kingdom, and that invitation stands.
The invitation involves lavish displays of royal pageantry and a banquet hosted by Queen Elizabeth. In a grassroots backlash, over 1.6 million people have signed a petition asking for the state visit to be cancelled, saying it will be an embarrassment to the monarch. Once a petition passes 100,000 signatures, British lawmakers must consider it for debate in Parliament. Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson already questioned for over an hour in Parliament on Trump's executive order. A growing list of politicians calling for the visit to be cancelled. The petition, already the second most popular ever on the parliamentary website, showing no sign of slowing down. This is just one of several protests planned for across London. 30 or 40,000 or so protesters adding their voice to what appears a global cacophony.
There is a groundswell of opposition to him right around the globe.
I think it's wonderful that so many people have actually come together just to voice their disgust as regards what Donald Trump has done recently.
Frankly, we want him out, don't we? I mean, you're not going to change his mind.
We don't agree with what Donald Trump's doing, and we won't stand for it.
The official line came in Parliament from Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. He condemned it as divisive and wrong.
This is, of course, a highly controversial policy which has caused unease, and I repeat that this is not an approach that this government would take. This executive order will make no difference to any British passport holder, irrespective of their country of birth or whether they hold another passport.
Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson saying a deal has been cut. The general political reaction against the executive decision by President Trump is pretty much universal. It follows on from a parliamentary petition in which 1.5 million people have called on members of Parliament to withdraw an invitation to Donald Trump to make a state visit to Britain. Leaders of all parties, apart from UK Prime Minister Theresa May, are calling for an end to that state visit, including, of course, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, himself a Muslim.
Well, U.S. President Donald Trump's immigration policy is coming up against a wave of challenges from in and outside the country. Some politicians are even calling for a probe into whether Trump abused his constitutional authority. Ian Shin takes a closer look.
Refugees are welcome here, hey, hey!
The world is still reacting to U.S. President Donald Trump's executive order announced last week, which includes a temporary ban on refugees and immigration from 7 Muslim-majority countries. Thousands took to the streets of New York, marching to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Office in Lower Manhattan.
I believe that everyone should have a chance to be here, and we can't profile on religion and race.
Really such a ruse to think that it's about security, because every security expert agrees that this will actually only make us less safe.
And Trump's controversial executive order has also infuriated politicians. Texas Congressman Joaquin Castro is among a number of Democrats calling for an investigation into whether President Trump intentionally exceeded his constitutional authority. Castro took to Twitter on Wednesday to say if President Trump ordered the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency to ignore a court order that goes against his executive order, Trump should be, quote, censured as a warning, and if he does it again, Congress should remove him. And the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, joined several world leaders in criticizing the order, saying that such measures could spread anxiety and anger that could spur terror organizations to recruit new members.
This is not the way to best protect the US or any other country in relation to the serious concerns that exist about possibilities of terrorist infiltration. These measures should be removed sooner rather than later. That was the appeal I made.
The Portuguese politician, who began his service at the UN on January 1st, also said that while countries have the right to manage their borders, their actions cannot be based on any form of discrimination, because that would go against the fundamental principles and values on which our societies are based.
Former U.S. President Barack Obama now weighing in on the travel ban, saying he does support the protesters and also that he fundamentally disagrees with discrimination based on religion.
The White House on defense Monday after a weekend full of protests spilled over into a flurry of lawsuits. U.S. President Donald Trump's 90-day ban on visitors from 7 majority Muslim countries resulted in confusion and detentions at airports around the world. The order is raising questions about its intent and its execution.
Coming into this country is still a privilege. We're the greatest country on earth. And being able to come to America is a privilege, not a right. And it is our duty, and it is the president's goal to make sure that everybody who comes into this country, to the best of our ability, is here because they want to enjoy this country and come in peacefully.
Now, Iraqi lawmakers are recommending a ban on Americans traveling to their country. Americans and Iraqis are cooperating in the fight against ISIL and humanitarian work.
If Mr. Trump wants to keep America safe from terrorism, then he should make our country safe too, because terrorism came to Iraq only after the U.S. invasion.
Iraqis also wonder why they are temporarily banned while Saudi Arabians are not. Most of the terrorists who committed the 9/11 attacks were from Saudi Arabia. None of the so-called countries of concern have known links to those events, but all were put on a list under President Barack Obama for additional border vetting. In a 5-page memo, U.S. State Department officials voiced concerns about the order, saying it would be counterproductive, sour relations with the Muslim world, harm ongoing humanitarian work, and restrict the U.S. economy.
When you talk about in a 24-hour period, 325,000 people from other countries flew in through our airports, and we're talking about 109 people from 7 countries that the Obama administration identified. And these career bureaucrats have a problem with it. I think that they should either get with the program or they can go.
Here are the top 5 countries with the largest Muslim population. You'll notice that not a single Muslim from these countries is banned from entering the United States. Because it's not a Muslim ban. It's a ban based on a list of terror-linked countries that was created by the Obama administration. Oh, you didn't know that. You just swallowed the frothing hysteria generated by the mainstream media yet again. Where were the protests? Where was the outrage when Obama banned all Iraqi refugees from entering the US for 6 months back in 2011? Twice the amount of time they're banned for under this Trump executive order. 6 times Obama banned migrants from mostly Muslim countries, and you were completely silent. Obama spent 8 years dropping tens of thousands of bombs on Muslim countries, and you said absolutely nothing. He armed the jihadists who were responsible for creating the civil war in Syria that led to the refugee crisis, and most of you supported that. But Trump stops a handful of them from entering the US, and he's the dangerous racist Islamophobe. Despite the fact that refugee admissions under Trump over the course of 2017, around 50,000, will be in line with those admitted under previous administrations. You said nothing about Obama arming Saudi Arabia to slaughter Yemenis, yet now you're suddenly all concerned over Yemeni refugees. Give me a break. But Chuck Schumer's crying over Muslim migrants.
This executive order was mean-spirited and un-American.
After he supported the attack on Libya that led directly to the deaths of thousands of Muslim migrants.
Now, the University of California at Berkeley went into lockdown after a violent protest erupted over a planned appearance by a right-wing speaker. The speech by Breitbart News editor Milo Yiannopoulos was cancelled after protesters threw smoke bombs and flares at the university's student union. Yiannopoulos is associated with the alt-right movement and has been accused of racism and misogyny. Well, Francis Reed is following this for us and has the latest now from Los Angeles. Francis, good to speak to you. So what's the situation now? Has the college been reopened?
No, we're still in a situation of complete lockdown at the moment. You have to remember this is one of America's most prestigious universities as well. The trouble started there just a few hours ago. It seemed like it was going to be a peaceful protest, but then the crowd got to more than 1,000 people, and that's when really the trouble started, setting fires, breaking windows, as you said, and really attacking the police. The reason for that, well, Milo Yiannopoulos was due to give a talk there. He's a British journalist, a controversial figure as well, famous for being one of the editors at Breitbart. Breitbart is a right-wing conservative news and opinion website in the US, which has had its own controversy as well.
Now, what was he due to be talking about, Francis, and why was the student body so incensed that he was going to be at the university?
Well, he'd been invited there to talk at a Republican event. The event had to be cancelled on one other occasion as well. Yiannopoulos himself is a well-known supporter of Donald Trump, but he's been a very divisive character. He's openly gay, but he's also been criticised by the gay community for making controversial comments that they didn't necessarily agree with either. And only last year he was banned from Twitter as well for inciting trolling of the actress Leslie Jones. Now, after the evacuation at the university, he went onto Facebook and he claimed the left is absolutely terrified of free speech. It will do anything to shut it down.
The protest has turned violent at the University of California, Berkeley, with the editor of the conservative news website Breitbart and Trump supporter Milo Yiannopoulos was due to give a speech against sanctuary campuses for undocumented students. Berkeley riots are part of a wider California protest against Trump's recent executive order about temporary travel restrictions against Muslims and his proclaimed fight against illegal immigration. California legislators are now pushing for a bill that some think would turn their state into a haven for undocumented migrants. And documentary filmmaker Mike Cernovich told us who he thinks is to blame for the continued unrest.
The American media is creating hysteria amongst the population, amongst the people, to try to incite violence and to incite riots in order to get more ratings and to sell more commercials. So what happened tonight has been part of a broader pattern of the media attempting to incite violence against the people and against each other. The students here who are very hysterical, a lot of them actually aren't really students. A lot of them are just bad people. They're a criminal element who found out that this is a great way to commit crimes without any kind of punishment. The mayor of Berkeley encouraged the riots to happen. He posted on his Twitter account, "This is what happens when you try to spread hate speech." You don't hear the media saying that people need to become united. They're not blaming the Democrats for this. They're not saying that Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or Tim Kaine should renounce this. There's clearly a double standard, and again, is because I sincerely believe the American media wants to encourage this type of violence.
It certainly does.
The mainstream left is tacitly supporting a fascist group that is committing terrorism to crush civil rights in the United States. Let that sink in.
To just make a statement by being here, and I think the protesters are doing the same, and props to them for the ones who are doing it non-violently, but I think that's a very rare thing indeed, so thank you.
Are you surprised, ma'am?
This is how they reacted to the beating, the pepper spraying of women, and the violent rioting at UC Berkeley last night. BuzzFeed writer Hannah Jewell.
Laughing my ass off, Berkeley.
Vice writer Hussein Kasvani.
Listening to Milo on Fox in light of all the stuff happening in Berkeley, and how he's being allowed to appear reasonable in all this.
Right, so a gay man giving a talk about offensive Halloween costumes versus violent rioters attacking women with pepper spray and flagpoles. And you're saying Milo is the unreasonable one. MSNBC producer Kyle Griffin.
Trump is considering pulling federal funds from UC Berkeley because he's upset about protests over a Breitbart editor.
Bludgeoning people with wooden poles because they have a different opinion to you isn't a protest. Who's to blame for inciting this mayhem? Time magazine for legitimizing violent riots during Ferguson. Newsweek for celebrating the attack on Richard Spencer. The Nation for romanticizing the attack on Richard Spencer. Regressive leftists like Nazreen Malik who say violence against Trump supporters should be tolerated. Regressive leftists like India Knight and the deluge of other journalists who called for or joked about Trump being assassinated. George Soros, financier of domestic terrorism. Arrest him and confiscate his wealth.
George Soros. He has ties to over 30 major news organizations and donates large amounts of money to progress the New World Order. Just so you can see for yourself what kind of man he is, here are some of his quotes. It is sort of a disease when you consider yourself some kind of god, the creator of everything, but I feel comfortable about it now since I began to live it out. I admit that I have always harbored an exaggerated view of my self-importance. To put it bluntly, I fancied myself as some kind of god or an economic reformer like Keynes, each with his general theory, or even better, a scientist like Einstein. Reflexivity sounds like relativity. If truth be known, I carried some rather potent messianic fantasies with me from childhood, which I felt I had to control. Otherwise, I might end up in the loony bin. But when I made my way into the world, I wanted to indulge myself in my fantasies to the extent I could afford.
One of the supporters of the nationwide anti-Trump protests is billionaire investor and philanthropist George Soros, who's well known for his charities around the globe, of course. Soros backed at least 50 groups involved in the mass women's march against Donald Trump's inauguration earlier this month. That event drew tens of thousands of protesters across the US alone. In his native Hungary, though, politicians accuse Soros of trying to influence politics. They're proposing now to ban groups that he funds. And as Ilya Petrenko explains next, there are similar calls across more of Europe too.
A mega fortune and a knack for success. George Soros, a man who's not used to losing. But can he take that kind of hit at 86? Well, the multi-billionaire has already had to face it on the home front when Hillary lost and Donald won. He funded her and loathed him. November 8th, boom.
What we have here is an unexpected mega setback for George Soros. He's in deep trouble.
Mr. Soros was born in Hungary. His life was marked by the mission outside America, philanthropy in his homeland and to the east of it. In other words, pushing democracy in what used to be the communist bloc. Watch out for 3 capital letters, NGO. Well, it looks like Trump's win emboldened the Europeans here and there to de-Soros themselves. In Hungary, the vice president of the ruling party is already promising to use all the tools at his disposal to sweep out NGOs funded by the globalist billionaire. This is a Soros-backed newspaper in Poland. The government's refusing to talk to its reporters or advertise in it. Oops. Or on a more grassroots level, activists in Macedonia. Yeah, there's been an attempt at regime change there lately. Activists in Macedonia have launched Stop Operation Soros, SOS.
Soros has been active in Macedonia for about 20-25 years. In the last 2 years, we've seen an escalation of their activities. which has forced us to take louder, stronger action because it's openly political and it's destabilizing the country.
There's more. No kidding. George Soros is even accused of putting the right man on the throne in the Vatican. Not exactly the communist bloc. Catholics have written to Donald Trump. Investigate and sort it out. For real, the gloves are off.
Seems so. Well, the Hungarian foreign minister, meantime, has described the activities of the Soros-funded groups in Hungary as anti-democratic, claiming they undermine the government.
George Soros founds or finances a lot of organizations in Hungary. He has a very clear, let's say, attempt or a very clear interest, because he has already announced it and spoke about this very openly, that he would like this government to fail. He would like to kind of fire this government because he doesn't like our approach, doesn't like our policies. But I mean, it's not George Soros who have to make a decision what government leads Hungary, it's the Hungarian people.
One ex-Obama administration now working at a Soros think tank. She's calling for the overthrow of President Donald Trump. We have an article, it's up on our website, written by Clifford Cunningham. And it talks about this lady, this lunatic, Rosa Brooks. She served as counselor to the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy from 2009 to 2011. And now she's working at this New America Foundation. She also worked at the State Department. She's outlined 4 ways to remove Donald Trump from office, most notably for having him declared mentally unfit. She says one possibility is that until recently I would have said that this was unthinkable, but a military coup, or at least a refusal by military leaders to obey certain orders. She's calling for acts of sedition.
Conservatives in Europe are hoping the Trump impact will reach their shores, too. After a wave of European terrorism the past few years, they're pushing for stronger security policies. And as CBN correspondent Julie Stahl reports, these conservatives are looking to shake up Europe's liberal establishment.
The record number of refugees in Europe, combined with terror attacks like those in Belgium and Germany, makes some conservatives long for change. The kind of change President Donald Trump promises to bring the U.S. Media on both sides of the Atlantic, however, are pushing back on that notion.
First of all, the Belgian press has been terrible vis-à-vis Trump's movement before the election, after the election.
Several European politicians attending the recent Jerusalem Leaders Summit told CBN News they look forward to America under Trump. Michael Modrikamen says while most Belgians don't understand politics in the U.S. or Trump's whole story, many are drawn to him all the same.
When you listen to people and people in the street, they say, we need also a Donald Trump in Belgium. That's very funny. So they don't know exactly and they hear only bad news, but they say, okay, we need somebody that is shaking the system. You know, it's exactly what we're willing to do, you know, shaking the system.
Last year, Modrikamen praised Trump in a video filmed only 11 days before ISIS suicide attacks in Brussels that killed more than 30 people.
America should not become another Brussels. It was once a vibrant, entrepreneurial, joyful, peaceful city. That was before. Brussels is becoming a third world city.
We are just lost in a kind of a postmodern society, hedonistic society, and it's exactly what America shouldn't become.
I think in Sweden they wanted Hillary to win, the most people, but I think Donald can make a difference, and he's a very powerful man, and I think it's going to be great.
European Parliament member Christina Winberg believes many of the 100,000 migrants in her country could become radicalized, so Sweden should take a cue from Trump.
Some things that Donald says about taking action on criminals and stop the migrants, and I agree with something of that.
Britain has already gone a step further. Roger Helmer says his country's vote to leave the European Union in June may have paved the way for Trump's victory.
I think there was a very real impact. And given that Donald Trump's victory, while it was wonderful, was by a pretty narrow margin, I really think that the inspiration of Brexit, of the people saying we've had enough of this and we're going to do something different, I think that could have tipped it.
Helmer said Trump has received what he calls negative ratings in Europe.
Frankly, if you go back through some of the comments he made through the campaign, well, you can understand why the bleeding heart liberals would be pretty upset. But I think in terms of what he's really going to do, he's a man of the right sort of values for America and for the world.
He says Trump's goals are good for Western civilization.
He wants to make America strong again, and frankly, for the Western world and Western values, that's important.
Whose country is this?
Mine.
Yeah?
And everyone else's. Everyone knows that this is my home and this is your home. So all he's doing is changing that.
And everyone is just headed home for the night. I can tell you, though, even on the busiest travel days of the year, I haven't seen a crowd like this out here.
Large protests continue across the country over President Trump's executive order banning entry to the U.S. for people from 7 Muslim-majority countries. Crowds have gathered at airports where men and women are being held and in city parks, including Battery Park in New York City. That's where CBS News producer Gilad Thaler is now. Gilad, what can you tell us?
Hi, Elaine. I am currently in Foley Square with a large group of protesters. This group began gathering and demonstrating in Battery Park around 2 p.m. Eastern Time. They have then had multiple speeches, including...
Shame on you and this man. Take aiming major under attack. What do you do?
But I'm also asked to look and determine if the executive order is rationally based. And rationally based to me implies that to some extent I have to find it grounded in fact as opposed to fiction.
It is our duty to fight. It is our duty to win.
Police had to lock the doors.
This is a wide sidewalk. So many people showed up. They packed it in both directions. They spilled over across the street and even onto the overflow area above.
If you couldn't see behind the signs, you wouldn't know their age, sex, or skin color. You just know they were
We can't do nothing. We have to do something.
united.
Love Trump's hate.
You had to wonder how much Amari Phillips really knows about it at age 10.
Mommy, that just said 2 bad words.
I know, don't say.
President Trump is keeping people from 7 Muslim-majority countries away from the U.S. He says he's trying to keep the country safe.
Why is fear dictating our actions, shaping our behavior?
Protesters migrated inside to keep the commander-in-chief from closing America's doors.
The way you do it is boots on the ground, moving with your feet, stopping injustice where you see it.
In turn, the airport locked its doors, but the curbside protest pushed on.
Come on!
I noticed Phillips changed the chant, and one small word made a big difference.
We stand with immigrants. We stand as immigrants.
He knows more than you might think. He and his brother were born into poverty in Ethiopia. This is their mom, who tutors kids with any religion from any country. This is their flag. This is their home.
Including the mayor, de Blasio. They quickly took to the streets chanting and singing in demonstration of the new executive order. And as you can see behind me, they still have a lot of momentum here together with signs. It's a very diverse crowd of multiple ages and religions. We've seen multiple signs talking about all faiths coming out together against this new ban that is currently only temporary for now.
U.S. President Donald Trump's executive order to speed up two controversial oil pipelines has sparked demonstrations in downtown Los Angeles.
We have to be the movement that sees Donald Trump to an early exit from the White House, because for him to be able to just willy-nilly sign executive orders that literally put our society into chaos